You are listening to Meet the Thriller Author, the podcast where I interview writers of mysteries, thrillers, and suspense books. I am your host, Alan Peterson, and this is episode number 105. In this episode of the podcast, we'll be meeting Michael Elias, who is an award-winning writer, actor, and director who has written for film, television, the theater, and fiction books. His upcoming novel, You Can Go Home Now, is a timely and addictive psychological thriller featuring a cop on the hunt for a killer while battling her own violent secrets. The book was published on June 23rd, and it's available now everywhere. Michael Elias has had a storied career writing for film and television. His screenplays include the Steve Martin classic film The Jerk, which was his first starring film, and one of my favorite movies of all times. He's also written for television, and he wrote and directed Lush Life, a movie starring Jeff Goldblum, Forest Whitaker, and Kathy Baker. We talk about his amazing background, his writing process, about writing thrillers, and a lot more, so stay tuned for my interview coming up. I mentioned that Michael Elias co-wrote the screenplay for The Jerk, starring Steve Martin, and directed by the iconic comedy legend Carl Reiner, who died last month at the age of 98. Steve Martin is one of the 80-plus instructors you'll find over at thrillingreads.com/masterclass. I watched his masterclass and I loved it. I highly recommend you check it out. And that is my affiliate link. And so if you sign up using it, you'll help support this podcast. So go check out masterclass at thrillingreads.com/masterclass. All right, here's my interview with Michael Elias. Hey, everybody. This is Alan Peterson with Meet the Thriller Author. And today I'm talking with Michael Elias here on Zoom. How are you doing this morning?
I'm fine. Thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
Yes, nice to meet you. I was just talking a little bit to you offline. You wrote one of my favorite comedy films of all time, Steve Martin's The Jerk.
Thanks.
And I was doing my research preparing for this interview, and just amazed how you've written just about every medium there is out there. That's so amazing. How was it writing a novel after writing for movies and TV and everything?
It was, I don't want to use the word fun. It was challenging and it liberating at the same time, because as you know, when you write movies, it's a collaborative effort. And I certainly enjoyed my collaborations with Steve Martin, that's for sure. But television and movies, you're a lot of people involved in your writing, especially after you finish it, directors, stars, studio executives, network executives. And I guess writing a novel, it was just, I was all alone and I didn't have to argue with anybody except myself. And I enjoyed that. It gave me a lot of freedom. And of course, after I finished, I worked with editors, and they were very helpful. But still, it was mine, and I think that. So I stand and fall on it. You know, when you write a movie, you can say, well, and if it gets bad reviews, you can always blame it on somebody, the director, the stars, or television. You can say it was a bad time slot. I don't know, but you're making it alone. Really
yeah, sometimes I hear those writers saying, "Oh, that wasn't the screenplay that I turned in."
That's right. Amazing. Which parts of the television show did you write? I would say, which parts did you like?
So can you tell us a little bit about this, about your latest novel? It's You Can Go Home Now.
So I guess in the thriller genre, it's about a woman who is seeking revenge for the assassination of her father, the murder of her father. And she, which occurred when she was 16, she becomes a cop to better find him, this murderer, and kill him. She's obsessed with revenge. Which is part of the theme of the novel. And then while she's doing this, and she's a cop in Long Island City, Queens, New York, she is given cold case murders to solve and investigate. And she notices that 4 of the victims' wives all had the same alibi when their husbands were murdered. They were in a battered women's shelter at the time. And is there a connection between this women's shelter and the deaths of these abusive men who may be waiting outside to kill their wives when they come out? And she goes into the shelter, and these two stories, artfully, I hope, come together.
Yeah, I did. I did. I had a lot of fun reading that. In your dialogue, I don't know if that's most from your experiences writing screenplays and teleplays, but it was a lot of fun to read and very very intense. Do you find that a big difference, like hopping from other genres to doing these psychological thrillers, or have you always enjoyed the genre?
Well, I certainly read the genre. I mean, I love reading thrillers and procedurals, and it's a lot of fun. It's challenging, and I probably carry over my experience and training as a screenwriter into the novel. Some people say, well, it's very cinematic. I take it as a compliment, and I like to keep the story moving and not waste time, and keep the reader interested in turning pages, and not too many of them.
Yes. Yeah, I love it. It's a very fast-paced reading. Short chapters. That's right up my alley. I love the
Good.
blurb. I love Steve Martin's blurb for your book. One of the paraphrasing here, it makes me wonder about his personal life.
Well, that's it's
Very Steve Martin.
yeah, Steve. He can't do any. He's just good at throwing that little joke. And he wrote me a couple of days ago. He says a very good career move, switching to writing a good book. Yeah, he's great.
What led you to sitting down and writing this story? Like, is it something that was always in the back of your mind that you wanted to write about this? Or?
Yes, I think it came out of thinking about and discussing with a friend Clancy Siegel about why we're so fascinated, why we like revenge stories, and why we like our heroes who extract revenge. Clint, Liam Neeson, Denzel, The Rock. We love those movies and those characters who they don't arrest the villain at the end. They throw him off a cliff or out of a building or something. Big action movies don't end with trials. So that's part of our DNA. Yet at the same time, we're told, and I think rightly, that revenge is not a virtue. It's something that it's either primitive or doesn't belong in our law-abiding society. So there's a contradiction, and I wanted to explore a character who is bent on revenge and then has to question it. So that's part of it. I mean, that was the impetus. Then I sometimes titles they come to me in dreams, and I must have dreamed this one. You Can Go Home Now, and I think I thought about who has to go home, who can't go home, and I thought about. I guess I was reading about it too, about domestic violence, the NFL, and all that stuff, and then it occurred to me that this would be a good setting. A women's shelter. The sweetest words I suppose one could hear is "You can go home now." I put it all together over a period of a couple of years. I have to say, it wasn't just sitting down and writing it. So I mean, it was eventually, but it was a lot of work.
Did you have to put in a lot of research before you sat down to write the story?
I did a lot of research along the way. You can't go into men can't visit women's shelters, and it's understandable. I talked to women who had been in shelters. I read as much as I could about them. There's plenty to read, their experiences. I got a hold of some material, welcome to the shelter, here are the rules, and so forth. Else I did a lot of research into women's, the abuse of women and how it affects families and children, all that stuff. So yeah, I did a lot of research.
And is Nina Karim, your character, is she based on the people that you've met or that you've encountered in your life? Or
that's a good question. I think that every character has elements of other people in them. Even myself. Somebody once said, I wrote this and directed this movie, Lush Life, about two jazz musicians, Forrest Whitaker and Jeff Goldblum. And Jeff Goldblum is married to Kathy Baker in the film. And somebody said, which character is more you? And I said, Kathy Baker, because she's a school teacher, and that's what I was. So I can't say. So everybody is a kind of, comes out of your experience and memory. A lot of the backstories or stories of people I know or have heard or read about or seen. So somebody said, when you're a writer, your life comes in handy. So you steal from yourself, you steal from your friends, you steal from your memory. And that's how it gets created, I think. So Nina, and then of course, Nina is from upstate New York, and she grew up in a small town in the Catskill Mountains, and that's where I'm from. So I gleaned as much as I could about her background and her place, which is my place.
So I didn't realize you had grown up in the by the Catskill Mountains. That back when there was the comedy. Do you ever encounter any of that growing up in that area?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It was my town was a small town, 1,500 people in the winter. I mean, Labor Day to Memorial Day, and then in the summer, I don't know, went up to like 10,000. The whole area did, because there was the New York middle class Jews came up, and that's where they vacationed, and the hotels had comedians and singers, and that's where that was. We went from a rural farm community in the winter to a thriving, almost New York show business place in the summer, and we all worked as busboys and bellhops and waiters all through high school and college, and that's where I got my. I have to say, watching those shows and seeing those comedians in person was inspirational for me in the sense that I said, this is what I want to do. I want to go into show business and be at first I thought I'd be an actor, and then I was a comedian, and then I became a writer in Hollywood. But that was the thing. I was as I said, I was very lucky to be and at the same time grow up in a rural farming community, and that was transformed. So it was interesting.
Yeah, you get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, yeah. It was.
So what's your writing process when you're finally getting ready to sit down and write the novel? Do you like do you say, I'm gonna write? Do you write every day, and you have like set hours, or I'm just kind of curious about the process?
Not so much anymore, but I will say I used to be an avoider. I would do as much as I could to avoid writing. I would change light bulbs, go to the hardware store. I would wash my car until I sort of ran out of stuff to do, and then I would have to sit down and actually write. And it turned out, I think my best hours were about from 3 to 7, and 4 to 7. So I was never someone who could write, get up in the morning and write all day. I think it's a myth. There are very few people can do that anyway. It's crazy. You have a life. But now I think I'm writing more kind of mid-morning I take a lunch break, maybe take a workout break, take a walk, and right. But it's, yeah, I guess that's my thing. The thing about writing in Hollywood and screenplays is, as I said, it's in television. It's all collaborative. So yeah, you come to work, and there's your partner, your collaborator, or staff, and you sit down and you start working. Which, because there's always somebody to pick up the slack. There's always somebody to say, "Here's a good idea," and that's how stuff gets written. When you're by yourself, it can be really hard. And I don't have that obsessive personality that I must be in, or I work all night and stuff like that. I'm not like that. If I were, I suppose I would have 10 novels. But at the same time, as I said, I have all that writing I did in television and film.
Which authors influenced you as a writer?
I read a lot when I was a kid. I mean, growing up, because television wasn't accessible and there wasn't as much, there were just 3 channels. And my father was always saying, turn off the television. And I did. I loved reading. Now I read more history than I used to for some reason. I find that, and I'm really interested in Russian history. I like science fiction. I like thrillers, and I like political thrillers. My favorites are John le Carré. I like Len Deighton. I like Donald Leon, who writes about Venice, a cop in Venice. I like foreign cop novels. I like Leonardo Padura, who's a Cuban novelist who writes about a Cuban detective in Havana. What else? And I go every once in a while. I guess I go back and I read something that I should have read, whether it's Proust or Dostoevsky or Tolstoy. I go back and I read that. but I'm always reading. And then I read books by friends, people I admire. Amy Lou wrote a wonderful book called Glorious Boy, a historical novel. April Smith, whose novel Home Sweet Home, terrific. Lily Anna Jessica Anya Blau. The Trouble with Lexi is one of my favorites. Yeah, so I'm a pretty wide reader, I would say. I really like. I think I've read enough, but he's probably written enough. But I really like Lee Child, and I like John Grisham. So these guys are great.
Yeah, Lee Child's retiring now. I guess his brother's taking over Jack Reacher, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah. So is You Can Go Home Now? Is that a standalone, or is it going to be a series?
I can't say if it's going to be a series. I am working, exploring a sequel, the next chapter in Nina Karim's life. So let's see how we do with this one. In the meantime, I do a couple things at once. Into another thriller, that mystery thriller, I guess, that takes place on Maui, and it's a lot of fun, and it's nice temperature and beautiful vistas and surfing and murder and what goes on behind the scenes in the luxury hotels, waiters, busboys, which I can identify with, and Native Hawaiian politics, which is and movements, which is very interesting. It's a really interesting history of Hawaii, and I think it could be explored. Oh, so that's kind of what I'm working on now. So I go back and forth. I think I'm waiting for, pardon the expression, an inspiration or something to hit me about the next Nina chapter in her life. Whereas the Maui novel is sort of laid out. So while I'm waiting for that inspiration, I'm going to continue doing the other one.
And you have another book that you've published before, The Last Conquistador?
Yeah, The Last Conquistador is it's a kind of Michael Crichtonish sci-fi about a lost city, Inca city in the Amazon. It's contemporary, and the city has survived. It's alive, and it's an FBI agent is investigating kidnappings of American children in Peru, and he teams up with his former lover, who's a Peruvian archaeologist, and they look for this city, which may be connected to the disappearance of children who may be about to be sacrificed, and that's the plot. It's as I said, it's a little science fiction, and yet at the same, and I hope a thriller. Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, that looks great. Yeah. The plot sounds great. I have to check that out. Add that to my to read pile.
Okay, great. I think you'll enjoy it. It's
yeah.
And also, there's a lot of magic realism in it. The guy, the FBI agent, who's Hispanic, is distantly related to Pizarro, who was the conquistador, and he has to deal with his ghost, and so deals with that.
And so before I let you go, I'd like to ask my guests, because we have a lot of aspiring writers, thriller writers that listen to this podcast. Any advice for writers, aspiring writers?
Yeah, well, I don't want to be flippant, just write. And the other thing, of course, is write what you know. But it depends on, I guess, if you do I have advice for screenwriters is see as many movies as possible and try to watch them not as so much as an audience, but try to watch them and see how problems are solved. And by problems, I mean, how do characters meet? How do characters tell their stories and who they are? And write them, and write one. And writing, I always say also that writing is rewriting, and the real fun and the hard work is after you finish. So the whole thing is, my advice is to, and I suppose this applies to novels too, for me, get it down and then go back to work and make it terrific. And the other thing is, it's a good idea to have a job while you're trying to be a writer, so that your writing time becomes more precious and you can earn a living and survive, because it's a very, very tough profession to earn a living.
Great, that's great advice. And then the listeners can find you, learn more about you, and find You Can Go Home is out June 23rd, and you have a website, michaeleliaswriter.com.
Yes,
they can visit you as well.
I say I have a page just for aspiring. I have a page called Projects in Development, which is all the things that I haven't sold. So it's not all success. Okay.
Oh, I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, in development. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's fascinating. So even with all your experience, it's still, it is always, you always have to be generating and working at it, no matter what level of success you've achieved.
Yeah, and the other thing is, by the way, again, for screenwriting and television writing, find a collaborator, find somebody to work with. It's a really good idea, I think. And I was lucky that I had such good collaborators: Steve Martin, Carl Reiner, Frank Shaw, Rich Eustace. I don't know. I know I couldn't have done it by myself. I know. It's just really helpful.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, thanks so much for your advice, and great talking to you.
Really enjoyed talking to you too. Take care, Alan.
Thanks for listening to the Meet the Thriller Author podcast. Be sure to visit thrillerauthors.com to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover great thrilling reads. If you enjoy the podcast, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review to it wherever it is that you're listening to this podcast, be it iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, wherever it is that you're listening to this right now. I would appreciate it. And please do check out my own thriller novels over at my website at alanpeterson.com. Until next time.